This is Space Cat's Peace Turtles, the unofficial podcast for Fantasy Flight's Twilight Imperium. Episode 45, Tech Paths Part 1. Music by Ben Prunty, featuring Matt Martins and Hunter Donaldson.
All right, so our first errata comes from Topaz Dragon 5676. Yeah, so
that's how we introduced the episode off the top, right?
Yeah, so welcome to Space Cat's Peace Turtles errata. Here at the top, we did a bad one. We did a real messy one.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's read what the messy is.
Let's
Okay.
I don't even I want to intro it a little bit.
Sure.
Because I want to take full responsibility on every level. This is something that another player did in a game that we were in. And
we allowed it.
And we allowed it? No, but that makes it sound like we knew
we
that it was
encouraged
wrong.
it.
We loved it.
Yeah.
We were like, oh, this
clapping.
is so cool. And it was totally against the rules. But we were just like, this is great, and we did
Hunter,
not think...
what are we referring to? We're referring to last week's...
First erratas from Topaz Dragon 5676. Integrated economy only lets you build one resource worth of units when taking Mechatol, not one ship. Also, you can't spend more resources during the free build, so I don't see how this works.
Okay.
We were excited.
We did a game in the play of the week last week. We described our own game where Yin got transit diodes round 1, which was still crazy awesome. But then we thought it was even cooler because he got integrated economy round 2 and built the huge van on Mechatol, which is illegal because we kind of misread or forgot. Here's my excuse. Can I give my excuse?
Go ahead. Give your excuse. This is you're in trouble, Matt.
Yeah, this is maybe the second time I've ever seen integrated economy bought in game.
Right.
Because generally speaking, I don't think integrated economy is that great of a tech. Purely because it's so late in the tech tree, right? Like integrated economy is a pretty good tech, but because it's 3 yellow deep, it very, very, very rarely sees play. Mm-hmm. Because it would be way too good if you could use it like round 1 and 2 when you're gaining a lot of new planets, right? That's kind of like gross. So they made it late game, but then as a late game tech, it's kind of not especially effective. So we just kind of forgot the specifics of how integrated economy works. And really, integrated economy is sort of purely for ground forces. Is kind of like it's only useful as a ground force builder, right? Like, can we agree that that's really the only reason?
That's mainly what it's for.
Because, like, if you take a 2-resource planet, that means you can spend... You may produce any number of units on that planet that have a combined cost equal to or less than the planet's resources. So what we got wrong is we thought we could build a number of units up to the amount and spend any amount of money, and we got it backwards. You can build any number of units, but the cost has to be what the planet is worth. And you do still also have to spend it. But, like... If you take a 2-resource planet, you can just build 4 ground forces as soon as you take it. That's wicked awesome. Yeah. That's crazy good, but not what we were trying to do with it.
Still doesn't stack with Sarween, right? That's not a thing.
You cannot use Sarween, and it's really only useful for build. Now, I'll say this much, still a very good yin get in that case.
Right.
Getting a bunch more ground forces on planets you just took it's a little bit win more, but it is still super good. And so I would still say very cool for a Yin to get it round 2, but we sort of what happened is Yin took Mechatol and had integrated economy, and we were like, or maybe it was just me, was like, oh, you could build a huge van there. Whereas I don't even think the player was planning to build the huge van on Mechatol. They were probably just going to drop a couple ground forces, and then we convinced them they could do otherwise. So I'll take full responsibility for this horrible mistake.
It's your fault. Yeah,
it's
definitely
I'll
your
take
fault. It was still a really good play of the week. It just doesn't have that cherry on top of the huge fan.
Right.
Like I still stand by
Getting integrated
that,
economy
getting
around
the
too.
tech. Yeah, it really changes very little because it like
And
he didn't
honestly,
even,
doing the same thing too, like taking Mechatol and then just getting 2 extra ground forces there. Like all of those steps are still
yeah.
good.
A
Everything
lot of
in
the
that
time,
process.
that's going to make the difference too.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
throwing those extra ground forces on Mechatol. You know how clutch that is.
Yeah. So why, Hunter? Why did we start with errata?
I think because we pooped the bed so hard.
Yeah,
that
and
we were just
also
like,
because you kind of actually weren't here to talk about it last week. I mean, you were sort of. I recorded that one solo, so I think it is worth sharing off the top here a little bit more about that game. What do you think? I want to
Yeah.
dive into. I only talked about what Yin did, but like we played a full game and it was a pretty fun one. So let's talk about that game where the Yin got integrated economy round 2. Who were you?
I was playing Barony of Letnev, very specifically leaning towards the scientist of Letnev playstyle that we described,
Right.
which I still don't know if that really was the right play for me or what.
Yeah, because sort of like what we outlined in that Barony episode is you sort of have to start going for scientists of Letnev before you know if the objectives are going to support you. And that's kind of the main weakness of it is like, yeah, you're going to get a ton of tech, but like in this game, the tech objectives didn't really come out. If they had, you would have been so terrifying. But
yeah,
they didn't.
The objectives didn't. Yeah, they didn't really help me. And also, like, it was nice. I actually had a lot more tech than basically anybody. Like, like most players in this game didn't even really have basic like movement really figured out.
Right.
So I felt a lot more mobile than everybody else. It's just that I was the only one, and Matt won the game, and he was sitting across from me.
Yeah.
So like it was very difficult for me to stop him in the end, or even really be a major problem in any way.
It feels like every time Hunter and I play together, I'm in the position that Hunter doesn't want me to. Hunter hates playing with me because if I sit next to him, he starts the game off being like, "Oh, I hate being adjacent to Matt." And then if we sit completely across from each other, it's like, "Oh, I hate being so far away from Matt where I can't do anything about it." Like, there's just never Hunter and I's relationship at the TI table is always in conflict. Always.
Hey, wait! I know exactly where I want you to sit.
Okay, where's that?
This is where you sit. This is where I like you to be. So you're not my neighbor, but you're my neighbor's neighbor.
Yeah, 2 away.
So this was you were
far
all
away.
the way across.
Right.
So like you were that player, but I want essentially you just be on the other side of my neighbor.
Can I ask which neighbor would you prefer? Like if in Hunter's ideal situation, would I be 2 away from you on the right or 2 away from you on the left?
On the left. I want
Picking
you
after you?
downstream of me. Yeah. I want you picking
and-
after me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was Mentak in this game, and I did the normal Mentak thing. Well, actually, no, I did my favorite Mentak thing, which is the entire reason I picked Mentak in this game was because I had Starpoint New Albion in my home slice. I had it adjacent to my home system. And to me, when I have that, I'm kind of just like already giddy about getting Cruiser 2 round 1. I will say,
and you did it.
I did it. I did do it. I still think it's super great, but I think I'm going to start toning down a little bit how in the past I've talked about it sort of like if you've got Starpoint New Albion in your home slice, like you should get like I was planning to take diplomacy in that game.
Right.
But the only reason I didn't
why?
Because I wanted to be able to flip Starpoint New Albion. That's the whole thing is to get Cruiser 2, you got to flip the green tech.
But Extra was in the game.
Extra was in the game, and they took diplomacy just before me. So I ended up taking. What did I take? I don't even remember what I took round 1. I think it kind of was irrelevant.
Regardless, that's crazy that you got an opportunity.
Oh, I know what I
do
took.
that.
Actually, okay, I do want to break this down. I was very into my round 1 Mentak play because Hunter, you had tech because you were playing Scientist of Letnev.
Right.
Extra had Diplo because they're Extra, and sometimes Extra does that. I took politics because I picked 5th, so I was second to last.
Oh my god!
This was my favorite thing ever because I took politics and then was offering up the speaker token. I offered the speaker token to you across the table from me causing me, like, I was going to have to pick fourth, but I offered you Speaker Token in return for timing out tech off of the Diplo play.
Yeah.
Right? I needed to take Starpoint out New Albion on my first turn.
Yeah.
Second turn, Xchaw needed to play Diplomacy. And then second turn for you needed to be tech. And I needed everybody to coordinate with me. So I offered basically to you to time out tech Speaker Token. And the offer to Xchaw was like, I'm giving Hunter Speaker Token. Xchaw was to my right. So it's like, Xchaw, you could either go last or you can go third. And if you want to go third, you need to play Diplo at the right time. So I used Speaker Token as all of the leverage that I needed to be able to get my Cruiser 2 round 1.
Yeah.
Now, was it worth it? I personally think so, because what it allowed me to do was I took an equidistant system round 1. I took RNM Mir with my 2 cruisers. I think that's right. Or did I go adjacent to Mechatol first and then
I think you went for RNM Mir.
Yeah, I did. I didn't get adjacent to Mechatol for a while. So I went straight to RNM Mir, which was important because Nalu was the person who was going to be racing me there, and she was very clearly gearing up. Like, Nalu and I had a contentious relationship from the start, and it revolved around the fact that our equidistant was RNM Mir. So I knew I needed to rush there, and getting Cruiser 2 round 1 was kind of crucial in that. Now, I will say the weakness of, like, putting everything into getting Cruiser 2 round 1 is, in most cases, you're sending both of those cruisers to the same system, since they can only carry 1 ground force, right? You're either sending 2 cruisers to 2 single planet systems and kind of almost feeling like you're wasting a command counter, or you're sending both cruisers to 1 system, and then it kind of feels like, couldn't I have done this with a carrier?
Right.
I don't know. It is a little bit. I'm all this is to say I'm not as into it as I have previously been, but especially in this game and in a lot of cases, I do think it's still very, very good. But I did miss having Neural. I never got Neural that game. I never had time to get Neural, and that's like the number one argument against skipping to getting Cruiser 2 round 1 is like, you never get Neural, and Neural's a great tech. So kind of like, why not? Why not delay things, have a more solid round 1, get Neural, and then just get Cruiser 2 round 2? I sympathize with that argument. But I don't know. I still was very into my Cruiser 2 round 1, and I think it helped make my game, because then from there I was able to be very, very aggressive against Nalu. I started digging in my PDS network and made it to where RNM Mir was very, very difficult for her to attack, and then continued to push. And I was basically pushing into Nalu's slice the entire game, because all my objectives just kept pointing me in that direction, unfortunately for Laura.
Right. And that's the thing is, when you're playing against Matt, this is just kind of some strategy for if you play against Matt on TTS. You have to have a zero tolerance policy. You can't you can't hope that, like, if Matt says, "Oh, I'm just taking this for a minute and I'll leave." That's not true.
Well,
that is definitely not true.
Can I it is
No, you have to gut him.
Here's the point, and you were saying this earlier, and I'll agree with this. It's not that it's not true. It's not that I'm just straight up lying. It's that if
the objectives
if
always
I
come
need
out
it,
and just encourage you to keep doing it. That's the problem.
If it's not going to get me the point, I'm not going to keep doing it. Which is what happened eventually with Nalu, which was like I had other objectives to go do, so I finally stopped. I wasn't going to just take Nalu's home system to take it. You know what I mean? I'm not looking to do that kind of thing. But if you have objectives that I need, then yeah, I won't stop. And I'll tell you that I'll stop, and then I won't. But I'm just objective focused, and that's all.
What should Nalu have done, you think? Instead?
Two things in my view, and I don't know that these would have worked. This is coming from I wasn't in her head and I wasn't in her game.
Right.
I don't know what her goals were, but the two things that could have helped were at one point she had an opportunity to either rush a fight against me or rush a fight against her Lizix neighbor. So here was the problem with Nalu, is she was fighting over Aaron M. Mir on one side and Barragler to 4 on the other side.
Right.
So she rushed to get Baragler to 4. And Nalu against Lizix is kind of an interesting matchup, I realized. I don't think either of them really has an advantage there, do you? I don't know who comes out ahead in a Nalu versus Lizix.
I don't think.
Which is what we saw. We saw
Yeah.
the two of them trade Baragler to 4, I think 4 times over the course of the game. But I think if she had just jumped on Aaron Amir, I would have had a hard time taking it back, and she could have then later gone for Baragler to 4. But I was able to just lock it down so much that it hurt her. So that's the first thing is she just rolled the dice and chose the wrong fight first. I think she should have gone for Aaron Amir faster. And the second thing is once I started to gut her, she didn't really plead her case to the board that much. Maybe she did and I just didn't notice it, but I don't remember her kind of like offering up stuff for people to attack me. Especially, I didn't have the neighbor to my right was Xcha, and at any point, Laura could have been like, Xcha, I need you to start hurting Matt very badly, and I will pay you to do so. She never really did that, and Xcha didn't really have an interest in hurting me and, taking advantage of the fact that I kind of pushed everything to my left.
Right, you push that direction, and your flank was pretty exposed.
Oh yeah, I was very exposed, and Xtra just chose to not jump on it. And Laura should have given some extra incentive to Xtra to do that. So that's what I think were Laura's 2 mistakes. Not even like what a mistake, but just like those are tough calls to make. And
it's like that time that you bribed Michael as a ghost player to help fight against Arborek.
In that Winu game.
That was in the stream game.
I think that's what, and we outlined this in the like winning from behind thing, but I think that's what you have to do. If you get hit early, you just immediately pay up. It's time.
You got
to
make
pay
deals.
Up. Yeah.
That's why you have those notes, is so that you can in those situations throw them out there.
Definitely. Hunter, tell me more about
and Nalu even has the best one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Prescience, like you.
Nalu, that's what I was trying to
do
get
something.
all game too. That's like that was the other incentive of continuing to gut Laura, was like at every move I was kind of like, I mean, you could give me gifted prescience and I will stop. But Laura was smart and did not give it up.
Right. Yeah, you would have just been ensured the victory at that point.
Right. Hunter, tell me a little bit more about your Scientist Aletnev game when the objectives weren't in your favor. What do you think did it? The problem is your left side was Yin, and Yin was doing a good job of just like you never got to go over there. I
was having the opposite game that you were having.
Right. You had 2 contentious neighbors.
I had 2 contentious neighbors that I clashed with. Yin was dumping ground forces on everything, and I didn't have the money to the whole uprooters of Letnev thing. I think we do need to kind of think about that strategy in general, because the problem is this: you have a ceiling on how much you can uproot, and it's a pretty it's kind of a low ceiling when you actually look at it.
How do you mean?
So you've got 5 dreadnoughts.
Yep.
You've got the flagship, and then plasma scoring.
Right.
So
you have that amount of bombardment.
Yin was literally dumping so many ground forces on things, especially with the early game transit diodes, that did not seem like enough.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
To
you
make
very
difference.
early on decided I'm not doing uprooters because it's Yin. I just won't. I won't be able to uproot.
I mean, I tried, but economically I could not.
Yeah.
I could not pump out the dreadnoughts fast enough.
Yeah.
And it just felt like we were just wasting time.
Right.
So I early on tried to cut Yin down. It didn't really work out. And then I had to turn on L1.
Yeah.
Which is actually what I was going to prefer not to do, because L1 has that flagship.
Yep.
That I feel like really hurts like a traditional barony fleet.
Yeah.
But I was able to take a lot more from L1. It's just like Yin just went such an interesting tech path and got it working so quickly.
Yeah.
That early game transit diodes, just watching all of those,
it was amazing.
Infantry move around, and they were just hitting so good to where it was like I knew that I actually probably needed to build a lot of infantry in order to uproot.
Yeah.
But that I never had time to do that.
Right.
I teched really well, and I had so much tech I can't even remember everything that I had. I had a lot, and I felt really secure in that way. Besides you with Cruiser 2, I was the only player that could move a lot of stuff around on the board, which I think was helpful fighting against L1 because I could figure out where L1 could get to and could not get to. It just felt like I could juke a lot easier.
Yeah.
The problem ended up being because nobody else had really like teched that well. When you were like the bad guy, I was the only one that could do anything about it, but I was sitting across from you.
Right.
Yeah, I was
you
the
had
only
the
one
movement,
that had the
but
movement
you were the furthest
to do,
away.
Right. If you don't have that movement in the late game, when it becomes about like, all right, how are we going to stop so and so? Well, that's like you have to have that movement in order to do it.
Right.
And I was the only one that had really invested in that.
Yeah. I want to say this about this game. I think Yin played the best game. I got the luckiest, is kind of how it worked out.
I agree with that.
I won
Yin was
because
straight up, it was nuts.
Yin was scoring points that it's not like they were just coming automatically. They were just like putting themselves in all the right positions. I think maybe Yin's number one mistake and the thing that cost them the game was just not getting Imperial as often as they could. They sat on Mechatol for most of the game, and they could have gotten more points out of that. But they were trying to not take a huge lead, right? They were trying to remain a little bit in the pack, but I think Yin can afford to take a huge lead because your stuff is so hard to take. It's kind of I think Yin is one of the few factions where it's just like I can jump on ahead and you're not going to be able to do enough to stop me.
I agree with what you're saying, but the thing was I actually had public disgrace like that entire game.
Oh yeah,
and I think he knew.
Right.
Because
he was being smart about everything. He was like he never like wasted a strategy card pick. So
yeah. I just feel like he knew because at one point after he had taken Mechatol, I was okay with I got his support for the throne.
Yeah.
And I was cool with that because I was like, well, I've got public disgrace, so I can stop him in that final round if he goes for a Mechatol play.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to know. I do want to make one quick note. I had like a really crazy action card game.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I ended up getting 3 sabotages, 3 of the 4.
Like right off the top too, right? You said like round 2, you were like I have 3 sabotages, and we were all like wondering if you were bluffing.
And you guys
not,
laughed.
And
no, you guys laughed, and I had 3 sabotages and like one other thing. It was completely insane. But I ended up, I had public disgrace. I used Rise of the Messiah.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of the just really great one-time use things, and that's why I say like Neural, like it's good. It's never a bad investment.
I wished I had Neural that whole game because that was my one. I was getting lucky everywhere else, and if I had also had like a good action card economy, I think I would have been significantly more unstoppable. But I never got to like add action cards to what I was doing.
A good rule of thumb I feel like is if you don't have Neural, do the secondary of politics.
Yeah.
Just
I was
consider
doing
that
that.
a must spend.
Yeah. Yeah. The other interesting part of that game was it was all people from the Space Cats Peace Turtles Discord. We played with Laura and Queso and DKVN and Enlightener. Enlightener was in from out of town. Everyone else was some of our Portland locals. And just a super rad game. Was really into everything everybody was doing. But Hunter, we're like 30 minutes into this episode, and we haven't even done what the episode is about yet.
Yeah, what are we doing today, Matt? What are we going to do?
I feel like we have been thinking about this episode a lot, despite the fact that we really only prepped it today. But I feel like this episode marks the beginning of Hunter and I like revisiting topics.
Yeah, this is, I would say, the revisionist arc of the show where we've laid a lot of groundwork down. Obviously we've been doing this show for almost a year now. Isn't that crazy?
Coming up on a year anniversary.
Yeah. And the information that we have presented in this show
hasn't been all bad.
Well, it's been all horrible. So we're starting over. This is episode 1. An introduction. It's uneven. Is really the thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people even pointed this out as we were doing the first round strategy guides. Our methods were changing.
Yep.
Because we were learning more about the game. So now we're kind of going to go back over a lot of things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we feel like we've changed a lot on And this isn't going to be like a specific to one faction kind of episode. We're going to just talk about optimal like tech paths, basically.
So in episode 4 of Space Cats Peace Turtles, we outlined a lot of tech. We walked through and we described every single technology. So we're not going to really do that today. We're not going to like read every tech and kind of review it. Right. That's what we were doing initially, and we were doing that before having even played the game. So that was kind of like this weird blind look at how tech all played off of each other. But obviously we have a lot more information now, so we want to kind of take that tech discussion to the next level.
This would be like a sequel episode to that episode.
Yeah. So let's first off, Hunter, you said optimal tech paths. We should kind of define that before we get into what that means for like a bunch of different factions and stuff.
Well, I think an optimal tech path just takes a couple things into consideration. It allows you to, well, first of all, it would allow you to score the basic tech objective of 2 tech and 2 colors.
Right.
It allows you to the tech that you're receiving is good and useful for your faction.
Right.
It's not tech that you're not going to use, things like Majin.
Yep.
And it also gives you access to enough upgrades to fulfill at least the 2 upgrade VP.
But even better if you can get 3.
And even better if you can get the 3 upgrade, which is, I think we both agree, is the easier of the 2 stage 2 tech objectives for sure.
Right. So let's talk about why TI4 has optimal tech paths, because this kind of, at least at our skill level in TI3, which I think you and I have both realized in doing the show was not that great. We were
we were not
at
super
TI3,
good,
but we weren't playing it. We were playing often, but I think there was a lot more like high-minded strategy we could have understood about TI3, and we weren't there. So I'm going to make a statement, and I could be totally wrong here, and people like Blarknob will probably call me out on it. But I'm going to say that TI3, the tech game was a little bit more open. Now, it was way more rigid because of the crazy tech tree.
The tree, yeah.
And like you never saw late-game tech. Like I never once saw X89 bacterial weapon get picked, right? And like fleet logistics was very rare.
Very, very rare.
But in the lower levels of tech, it always felt like you could kind of just get whatever you wanted, because everyone started with like a weird mix match, like just a weird mix of tech. It wasn't like everyone started with like a baseline, just like, oh, some people start with deep space cannon and some people start with this. And like, it was a little bit all over the place, and it meant you could kind of just get whatever you wanted in any game. There was no just like, oh, if you're playing as this faction, you have to get this. And TI4, because of the way they chose to structure it, they made late game tech more accessible, but in doing the color tech tree, the like much more basic method, they also made it a lot more shallow. And by that I mean the concept of optimal tech paths I think just didn't exist in TI3. And so the idea of, first off, the technology objectives, score 2 in 2 colors, 2 upgrades, 3 upgrades, 2 faction tech, all of that already set forth okay, there are certain tech goals all factions need to consider now. And then in addition to that, in TI3, faction technology was not a part of the tech tree. Mm-hmm. Faction tech in TI3 was just, it had an extra cost.
Separate.
Completely separate thing. So like some factions would just get their faction tech, and others is just like, you never really get it. There's no point. You just get whatever tech you want.
There's just a lot more synergy with the new system.
Right. The new system is now, in certain cases, or in all cases, like, okay, Xcha has a green tech and a yellow tech as their faction tech. And if you want to capitalize your strengths as a faction, you're probably going to get your faction technology, especially if it's like, halfway decent. Most factions are trying to get their tech, which means you are forced to get certain other tech because of that sort of hierarchy of like, okay, well then I have to get neural, and then I have to get instinct, yada, yada, yada. So because of all of those things, all factions really have like 1 or 2 desirable tech paths, right? It's not like every faction can just get whatever they want. They can do that, but it is not optimal. It is not efficient. It doesn't really help you achieve like the superpower that you need to get by the late game, right?
Right. Right.
So
There's a lot more. I would call it tech symmetry.
yes.
Like a lot of the factions have a very like kind of elegant, like you get this tech and then this tech and then this tech, and once you
Right.
have all of those, now you
now
can
you're
do
ready
this.
to do your
Yeah.
stuff. Now you're
Right.
you're
That's-
playing as your faction. You start as like your faction, but like the light version, and the whole
Right.
game you're trying to gear up to what we always describe as how do you become a superpower. That's what we mean when we say that.
Right.
Like your
I
optimal
think-
tech path gives you access to your superpower.
Yeah, I think TI3 had the same concept. It was just less symmetrical.
Right.
So like it was just a little more awkward as to how you would set up all of, and you would have to get more tech that didn't really directly help you,
Right.
which is still a problem. Like that's still something
Sure.
that you have to do sometimes, and even what we're going to talk about with these optimal tech paths.
Right.
But the idea of a tech path being optimal is a path where you don't have any dead tech
Yeah.
that you're never utilizing, that isn't important
Right,
at all.
right. So let's outline this a little bit more too. We're going to kind of go through a lot of these factions and talk about like what we see as the optimal tech paths. But I think before that, we want to really outline. And Hunter started to do this, and I want to give some examples for all the things that Hunter outlined of like what we're considering when we try to like design an optimal tech path. Right. So the first one is you need to consider the objectives. You need to get 2 tech and 2 colors. You need to be prepared to get 2 upgrades. And then even more so, you need to be prepared to get 3 upgrades. We're not really considering 2 tech in every color because that's, first off, that's just like the most boring way to play. Because if everyone was always considering 2 tech in all 4 colors, everyone's going to get the same tech pretty much every game. And that objective only comes up, pretty rarely. The reason we go ahead and consider 3 upgrades is because it's actually not that far out of the way in most cases. If you can get 2 upgrades, you usually can get a third without going out of your way. So that's
Right,
an
and the
easy
fact that
2-point that's an easy 2-point objective to acquire
Right.
for most factions.
And any tech objective that you can accomplish within a one round, you might as well just consider that you have it in your pocket, right?
Right.
Like
right.
Like if you have your 2 upgrades and you're like, cool, I've got that, and you qualify for a third, which is very it's pretty obvious. That's almost always going to be true.
Yeah.
Well, actually, not always, but there's just a lot of the tech paths that we're going to talk about are kind of a lot of the same choices, and I think some of the reason that comes up is because the colors were not evenly distributed as far as like what upgrades they provide.
Right.
There are some tech colors that provide
Right.
a lot more
Right.
like upgrades than others,
Like
basically. And a lot more useful ones.
When we throughout this episode, we're probably going to often refer to tech paths as being like 2 colors in conjunction with each other because we're always trying to get 2 tech and 2 colors, right? So one of the ones that we realized in looking through all this is like the green-red tech path doesn't really exist. Nobody really goes for green and red as a baseline because there's no upgrades that you can really benefit from. Like, first
Right.
off, Destroyer 2 is just not that impressive of an upgrade. War Sun is so deep that it very rarely seems worth it to get it. So that's the 2 major red tech upgrades that you're just not going for. And so then the only other option is the green stuff. And yeah, ground forces are good, but like usually you're coupling ground forces with movement.
Carrier.
You need to
and,
get
like,
those
yeah.
ground forces places. You don't need red
Right.
tech to enhance the ability of your infantry. You need blue tech. So with objective, like because the objectives are laid out the way that they are, it makes it to where certain tech paths are just not very viable, mainly
Right.
green red.
Right.
The next thing is
It's the lack of synergy.
Yeah,
that's
it's
that's
just
the
a
thing.
lack of
You're getting different tech abilities that are not, they don't make each other more effective in
Right.
any way.
right.
Yeah.
So the next one is faction tech. We have to consider every faction's faction tech in this sort of, tech tree that we're building, this tech path. And our goal is to always reinforce our strengths. The best examples of this are something like Mentac, or who else like really Federation of Soul is like the number one example of just like their faction
Right.
tech helps them so much more than it helped, than anybody else. I would describe this as like the Muat problem. Muat sort of has a hard optimal tech path because their 2 faction tech just aren't that. Like their upgraded War Suns is one thing, but their other tech is not that impressive. So you leave that out of your consideration, and it makes it harder to design an optimal tech path.
Right. I mean, I would say an even better example would be something like Sardak Nor that start with no tech, period.
Right.
And then one of their faction tech is 2 red, and the other is 2 blue, 1 yellow.
Right.
There's no symmetry in
Right.
that.
You have to
that
just
is
pick one.
completely different directions.
Right.
And
Right.
the idea that you're going to be able to get both is very, very difficult.
Right.
As like, you know, I think maybe Ghost of Creus is kind of interesting in that way too. That it forces you to kind of go possibly a blue-red path, which is like kind of different.
Right.
I think probably the faction with the best like tech symmetry is essentially either Isarl or Soul.
Right.
Because you're going to want to go blue-green.
Right.
You're going to want to get those upgrades. Those all synergize with like the objectives.
Right.
And you start with a blue-green.
Right.
And
you're
then with
ready
Isarl,
to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and then with Isarl, you can essentially go all the way down green, skipping every questionable green tech for a faction tech.
Right. Right.
It's just different. They have different symmetries for every faction.
Right. The next consideration is like we want to get tech as fast as possible, and we don't want to get any extraneous tech because we're trying to fulfill these objectives and we're trying to get all these things. I call this like the neural motivator factor,
Right.
which is that neural motivator is a great tech and everyone has access to it. And technically speaking, like everyone benefits from it. You could make the argument to me that everyone should get neural motivator every single game, no matter what. And I would pretty much agree with that, except for when you have to consider optimal tech paths. And so, like in the Mentak game we just described, I would have loved to have neural, but I was so focused on getting my Cruiser 2 and then gunning it for mirror computing because I want to optimally get that tech.
Right.
It doesn't save room to just get neural.
Right.
So whereas in TI3 you could have gotten little things along the way because kind of like, oh, I sort of have access to everything as long as it's in the tech tree that I'm, in the branch of the tree I'm going down. In TI4, the branches are there just aren't as many, and so you don't jump onto other branches as often. So,
also, there's a timing factor with neural.
Right.
Like, if you get neural round 1 is the most useful it's going to be. So
Right.
if you're getting it after round 1, there's an opportunity cost
Right.
that you have to consider.
every round that you don't get neural, you have less reasons to get neural.
On the last round of the game, neural is not
useless.
a good buy.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It is completely useless if you're literally in the like, oh, we're gonna finish things in the action phase or status phase of this round. Like, obviously.
And I don't even think just neural is that. I mean,
No,
Sarween has
is
the
the same
opportunity
problem.
cost.
Yep.
Daxiv, sort of, depending on like the timing. If you're not
Right.
going to get to use Daxiv, then whatever.
Right.
I think transit is pretty much always useful, but that's just me.
Right.
It's all about looking at what you could possibly research and thinking about what's going to help you. You picked mirror computing over neural,
Right.
Which you won the game. So like I
maybe
don't
it's
think
a good pick. Right.
right. Like you're like, oh, I'm sad that I didn't get as many action cards. Well, it didn't matter,
Yeah.
and it didn't end up factoring into it.
Right. The next big consideration is starting tech. We're trying to get to our superpower mode as fast as possible, and the best way to do that is to get things that are in line with the tech that we start with.
Right.
This is sort of the Hakan. This is what makes Hakan weird. This is also like the L1 Z1X problem, I would say.
Right.
L1 Z1X starts with green-red, and I would definitely make the argument that you maybe never get another green-red tech ever again with
Yeah.
Lizzix. Like, there's very little reason to get any other green-red despite starting with it. Hakan is weird because your faction tech is green-yellow, and you benefit a lot from going down like green and yellow, but you start right next to Dreadnought 2. Why not go that way, right? Is kind of always the argument. Why not get Dreadnought 2? You're almost there. So when we consider optimal tech paths, we're always going to try to consider what you start with and how that enhances your ability to get to that late game stuff faster.
It's just another factor that contributes to the symmetry or asymmetry of a faction's like tech options. And yeah, Hakan is very interesting in that way because you have access to so many different interesting like directions you could go. You could gun it for quantum data hub now,
Right.
which a lot of people do that and they love it. But Dreadnought 2 is also a very important, like, if not the most important upgrade.
Yeah.
And you're so close. You're closer than anybody to that.
Right. And the last consideration for an optimal tech path, and this is sort of like, this is where tech skips come in, and that's we want to ignore bad tech as much as possible. This is the Mage and Defense Grid problem. Mage and Defense Grid is a mostly useless tech. There are a couple of side cases where it's okay, but for the most part, like, the reason you don't see that many factions want to go down the red tech tree is because Magein is almost always in the way, and buying Magein is a waste of a round.
Right. And there's also the I have to buy Graviton. I do not have any PDS problem.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of the same
Graviton
thing.
can be a great tech, but if you're not a PDS faction, Graviton is completely useless.
Right. You will just straight up not get to use it at all. And that's I like you put bad tech in the outline. I like to think of those tech as dead tech.
Yes.
Just like it's just there. It's not doing anything.
All
for
it
you.
did was grant you access to the other things that you need, and that's
And
not optimal.
you want to avoid that. Like
Exactly.
you don't want that to happen. You want your tech to work for you, basically.
Right.
And accomplish you objectives. That's the idea, is that it does both.
Yeah. So, the other things to just, like, we kind of have to make little side notes for are, obviously we want to consider secret objectives as well. We kind of put the focus on the public objectives because it's way more common that you see, especially the stage 1 public objectives, 2 tech and 2 colors and 2 upgrades. You just have to consider those because they're going to be in a vast majority of games.
Well, and you're going to see them more often than anything else, basically.
But you know, the best, the most optimal tech paths are the ones that also leave room for you to be able to claim both secret objectives, because there's nothing better than, like, sitting on a free secret objective, right? Like, oh, I could just claim this tech secret objective at any point. The number of times I've, like, won a game or, like, been able to maybe win a game because I'm just going to get a free secret objective in the status phase, it's a hugely powerful thing. So the 2 secret objectives are 2 faction technology and 4 tech of the same color. I wouldn't start a game planning to get those because you can't control what secret objectives you're going to get. But the most optimal tech paths are the ones where you're going to have easy access to those. That's the other reason we say Soul and Isarl have the most efficient things, because Soul, everything they're doing leads to them fulfilling these objectives, and Isarl, kind of the same thing. Like, it's very easy to get the 4 tech in 1 color because you're just already doing it. That's what we always want to consider. We want to already be doing the stuff that gets us those objectives, right?
Exactly.
We never want to go out of our way to score a tech objective. We want to be getting tech that is good for us and also scores us tech objectives.
Right.
What's some other messy business? You brought up Dreadnought 2 earlier. Dreadnought 2 is just so good, and you kind of always have to consider, am I going to go for Dreadnought 2, right? I mean, it is optimal to get Dreadnought 2 because Dreadnought 2 is so good. The ability to ignore direct hit is kind of a huge deal in many games. It's almost like my least favorite thing about Dreadnought 2 is that, like, I wish they had decided to give it different upgrades, because the ability to ignore 4 of the action cards that are some of the most powerful action cards, like, that is rough.
I think it's actually more of a meta advantage.
Right.
Like, because the thing is, when you don't have Dreadnought 2, you get scared to use your sustained damage, which is part of the whole reason that you built the Dreadnought in the first place.
When you have Dreadnought 2, you just are free. Like, it is the most liberating thing in the world to just, like, I can just send my Dreadnoughts in and I'm going to be able to get a free hit every single combat. Like, it takes a lot of weight off. The other one is ground forces. Ground forces, just the way TI4 is designed right now, and our understanding of it is that, like, ground forces are super important. It's a simpler math equation than space combat. Invasion combat, ground combat is very, very basic and can be swayed a lot by having better and more ground forces.
Yeah, it's like my 2 favorite upgrades is Dreadnought 2 and Infantry 2.
Right.
Because it's also, don't forget about, not only are they hitting better, it's just the fact that you get to
keep them in, like, 50% of situations. It is just so good, and we have to always consider with every faction, like, do I go for ground forces? Because I do need better ground forces. And especially like when it comes down to if like two factions are optimally getting better ground forces, I'm looking at Seoul and like Yin, then everybody else kind of has to consider getting better ground forces because you just have to keep up. If you don't keep up, they're going to crush you. So sometimes you have to change the way your faction goes down tech because you kind of just need to get better ground forces. I would call that like the ghost problem, right? That's where my ghost guide was mostly born out of is, no, you wouldn't normally go for ground forces, but because you don't have a lot of other advantages, you sort of need to just get the best upgrade in the game, and that will help you more.
And it's like our Yin player the other day didn't really... It's not like our Yin player had a better fleet than me. They were my neighbor.
Right.
I was barony. I had a better fleet.
Right.
But it just didn't matter.
Right.
If you have ground forces everywhere, it's like I don't have the resources to cut into your slice, basically, and actually take things reliably.
It's the most defensive thing you can do.
Yeah. It's just like it gets to a point where if people focus on ground forces and have, infantry too, it's like, this is not worth the effort. That's the thing. It's the opportunity cost becomes like, I just need to go for somebody else because I don't have time to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to kind of get into the second half of this episode now. We wanted to kind of do an overview of all of the factions again and the tech paths that we feel like make the most sense to them.
Right.
I know that we've already, in all of the first round strategy guides, we've gone over tech paths for everybody.
Right.
But at this point, a lot of our feelings have changed and our ways of thinking about tech paths has changed.
Be prepared for us to contradict ourselves a little bit in some of this.
Right.
And it's just because our opinions have changed. And
also, we want to do a little bit of more of a theory crafty type thing.
Yes.
So we're going to bring up a faction, talk about the things that make the most sense for them, where the most synergy is, but then also just kind of be like, what else could you do? Just kind of throw some spaghetti at the wall a little bit. Like,
right.
Would be really cool.
Just explore. This is almost sort of like if we weren't playing optimally, what would we do with this faction, right? Like if we didn't have to consider the objectives and all these other things, what could we get away with? And is that worth considering at all?
Yeah.
So let's get two out of the way right off the bat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jolnar.
Federation of Soul.
No. I want to get these other two right out of out of the gate. Like Jolnar, we don't talk about in this conversation because everything Jolnar does is optimal. There is no non-optimal Jolnar tech path. You start with almost everything completed. There's no way you're not going to accomplish objectives. I mean, I guess there are ways you wouldn't do it, but like it's so easy to consider them. Like you should score every tech objective, and it shouldn't be going out of your way to do it. And that's all there is to say about Jolnar.
And it just seems kind of silly to even be like, oh, there's a lot of symmetry here because there is, because they start with
you start with everything and you get whatever you want. You never get dead tech as Jolnar, or you definitely shouldn't be getting dead tech because you can skip
but even
tech whenever you want.
Do, it's probably not even that big of a deal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like even if you happen to, you're going to be getting so much tech that like whatever.
Yeah.
And your faction tech, like, get them.
Right.
You know?
Just get everything.
Like, it just seems like, and you're going to be able to pretty easily.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Yeah. And I don't want that to sound like a cop-out of, like, we're not... maybe it feels like we've never told you as a Jolnar player, like, what is the best thing to get. But it is truly because you have to take it game to game. I have had Jolnar games where, like... I wanted to go for War Sons, right? That has happened. I don't think it's the most optimal thing. I'll say this much. If we're going to give people something, you should put E-Res Siphons in your number one consideration. E-Res Siphons is a ridiculously good tech and is amazing to get round one or like very, very early.
It has that kind of neural motivator aspect too of like the earlier you get it, the more useful it'll be.
Right.
It's also a deterrent. It has a meta aspect.
Yep.
People have to consider when they're attacking you that they're going to give you trade goods. Everybody gets so mad all the time now when you attack Jolnar and give them trade goods.
Yeah.
I've been in so many games where people are like, is this necessary? Are you just attacking them are you going to get something out of this? Because you're going to give them trade goods, and we don't like that.
Yeah. The reason I can't consider tech paths of like upgrades is because, well, for starters, you start with access to 3 upgrades, like right off the bat. Because you have 1 green, 1 red, 1 blue, 1 yellow, you can get Cruiser 2, you can get PDS 2, you can get Fighter 2. Like, and all of those are good. You know what I mean? So there's you can get any upgrade that is good, and you're going to be fine. Obviously, Infantry 2 is a great consideration for Jolnar since their infantry sucks so much, and you're only 1 tech away from getting that. Dreadnought 2, you're 1 tech away from. Carrier 2, you're 1 tech away. Like, just you're going to get upgrades, and it's going to be very easy, so I'm not considering that. So the only other tech that's, like, worth bringing up as Jolnar is just like, well, you can get to late game stuff. So which late tree do you want to go down? Go for it. You know, do you want, is there an advantage in getting light wave deflector this game? Is there an advantage in having assault cannon? Are you going to benefit from having integrated economy, et cetera, et cetera? You know, obviously, you know, the best example in all this is like, you should probably also consider getting hypermetabolism like round 1 or 2, right? If I'm going to put a priority on any tech, it's E-res siphons, hypermetabolism, and PDS2. Those are like the 3 things I think Jolnar benefit from the most. So there, I gave you a recommendation for Jolnar. Don't at me.
Leave him alone. Leave him alone.
The next one is just Necro. Necro doesn't play this game.
How are we even going to do that? We don't even know how to
now,
do it, so.
There's a little bit in terms of just like, if it's a good tech game and people getting a lot of tech, you get to like pick your poison sort of thing. You know, like, oh, okay, who am I going to attack to get what tech? But I don't even want to tell you to do that, because that shouldn't be how you're playing Necro. I don't think it's good to play Necro as just like I should randomly attack people so that I can get some good tech. No. You attack people because it gets you objectives, and you are lucky to get tech along the way, right?
Right.
I don't play Necro as a like, let's feast on all of the tech out there. You play Necro as do stuff and like happen upon some tech. And sorry, you just don't get to play the tech game as intentionally.
Right. I mean, I feel like there is something to be said for like, you're gonna have to just take the tech that synergizes with what you're building. Like if you're
go for the objectives too, right? Like, yes, in situations where it's like, okay, 2 tech and 2 color came out, I do need to attack. Like, that is when it is important to attack people to get their tech, because it is worth a VP. So of course I'm considering that. I'm just saying, if the tech objectives aren't coming up, you're not just willy-nilly attacking people so that you can acquire some tech.
Yeah, I find frequently that with Necro, I almost always end up going after fleet technology.
Yeah, definitely.
Because like if I were to be like, I'm going to do like a PDS Necro,
you
can't guarantee
control.
that you're going to get the technology that you need. And having fleets is always going to be good. So I don't know. It
really just depends on your neighbors. Necro becomes a mirror of their 2 neighbors. Whatever they're gonna get, you're gonna kind of match that a little bit.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into like the real stuff.
Yep.
You said Soul, and Soul is sort of like the reason for this discussion, right? Soul is the most optimal tech path in the game.
It's just so pretty.
It's the reason Soul is good, is just because like you don't buy a single dead tech, and everything you get leads to objectives and increases the ability of your faction.
It just all goes together so beautifully too.
So
pretty.
Hunter, we did it in their faction guide, but lay it out for me again. What are we doing with Soul?
So we're starting with Neural, which is great. We also start with anti-mass, which is useful.
Yeah.
Mostly for what it enables us to do, and less about the tech itself.
Right.
But I will say this: anti-mass is, in my opinion, never a dead tech.
Nope, never. Always,
because you never know where
useful.
those asteroids are going to be,
and it's always -1 to PDS. Like, it's going to benefit you somewhere.
Right. It's useful.
Don't forget that, by the way. I always forget that anti-mass is -1 to PDS. It's the only addition or subtraction in the game outside of just like single-use action cards. TI3 was ripe with like, oh, I got to do this mental math. Anti-mass is the only mental math in TI4 now, and because of that, I forget about it all the time. So don't forget, anti-mass is not bad.
Right.
Anyways.
So obviously we're like I said, I definitely have stuck to my guns when it comes to this. You got to get that gravity drive so that you can throw your stuff out there in places that is annoying to people, so that you can get to Mechatol and take it early.
Right.
And scare people off. And the only way you're going to do that is by beating other people to it.
Yep.
So you're going to get that. You're going to get, then you can either go ahead and pick up Advanced Carrier, or what I think is probably the better play is go down green.
Yeah.
And your options with green are pretty interesting because you could go for Daxiv. It's
Right.
useful to you. However, you could also skip and go to Hyper
Right.
and just be a command counter junkie.
Right.
Because
it's the perfect example of like there's just nothing you can't do with Soul. Like
Right.
you have the advantage of being able to skip something that is even still good for you. Like you just get to
Right.
pick which of the
Right.
two great tech do I want to have this game, or which of the two do I want to have right away.
I could even see myself skipping to Hyper because it's better. It has the neural factor. The earlier you get it, the better it is.
Right. And then get Daxiv
coming
later.
back to Daxiv. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, you want those two upgrades, those two faction upgrades, because they're just fantastic and they synergize with you so well.
Yep.
I'll say Advanced Carriers is less essential than Spec Ops 2.
Yeah.
I could see people making an argument for like, oh, if maybe you rush for Spec Ops 2 and then go Sarween and go for Dreadnought 2.
You know what I found
I see
interesting?
that.
In the tournament, I saw way more people rush for Carrier 2, though. I kind of get the argument of like, okay, if I have Gravity Drive and Carrier 2, I'm really getting my ground forces in some crazy places. And I'm cool with that, especially because it's like, okay, they have sustained damage. I can send one carrier with like 4 fighters and 4 ground forces anywhere I want, right? And it's gonna do whatever it wants. So I get that. But I think Hunter and I just love ground forces so much, we're going to kind of always recommend Infantry 2 first. But I do think you can pick. You can do either, and they're both going to be great. Because you're going to get both anyways. It just doesn't matter. It's which do you want first?
I also see people make the argument that you don't even need Spec Ops 2. That they'll be like, your infantry are already better.
Sure.
You don't need to worry about it.
That reroll, though.
Yeah, it's the reroll. It's
I say
really
reroll,
about
that revive, whatever you want to call
revive,
it.
Revive, yeah. That ability to keep them
Gen synthesis.
I feel like we just love.
Yeah.
So there's kind of the basics that we've already laid out before.
Let's talk about what does that give you? Like, why is it so optimal? Okay, well, we got 2 blue and 2. We started with a blue and a green. It took us 2 tech to get another blue and another green, and then 2 more tech to get 2 upgrades, right? So now we have already fulfilled all stage 1 tech objectives. We also have the bonus of, because both of our faction tech are our upgrades, we just qualified for a secret objective for free.
Yep.
So now all that we have left to do is 2 more tech in one color for the other secret, 1 more upgrade, and then, we kind of have to think about if we're going to get 2 tech in all 4 colors. But like we said off the top, you're never really making that a plan, right? So the other considerations then are, okay, our 3rd upgrade, we already qualify for, Fighter 2, if we want to do it. Also, we could go out of our way and get Dreadnought 2.
Yeah, I could. I also want to throw this out there. You could. So, like, it's the thing about Soul that's interesting is, and I think I've definitely seen people write to us, kind of against the path that we propose.
Yeah.
But like, there's actually not really a lot of bad choices here.
No.
So like, if you're listening to what we're saying and thinking like, I'm not going to go for Spec Ops 2. I think you should get Fighter 2 and Advanced Carrier. That also sounds
I'm down.
good. Like,
yeah.
I'm not against you here. I'm saying like, it's such a good start. You have so many good options that are so pretty.
Yep.
Even like talking about 4 tech and 4 colors.
2 tech and 4 colors, yeah.
4
tech and 1 color.
4 tech and 1 color,
right.
sorry. 4 tech and 1 color for Soul is a fun game. Because Fleet Logistics is not a bad tech for Soul at all.
No.
Lightwave is a bit weird, but maybe you're getting...
Still great.
Maybe you're sending your carrier through... Lightwave is good for everybody.
Right.
But like...
3...
I don't know.
Lightwave with carriers that move 3 with Gravity Drive. Like, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's like, hey, I'm at your home system with my Spec Ops right now.
Right.
You want to do something about that?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I'll
make the case for green as well.
Ahead.
I mean, X89 is not great, but like if we're already getting Daxiv, Hyper, and starting with Neural, like okay, then it's only 1 more tech to just go ahead and grab X89. I'm not maybe going to use it, but I'll fulfill the objective.
When you're 1 away from a certain tech objective, you basically have it in the pocket.
Yep.
So
that's Soul. Soul is just like the primo optimal tech faction, and that's why they're so good.
Do we have anything weird we want to throw out for them?
I have one.
Ideas?
I don't know if you've probably played more Soul than I have, or you definitely have. But I have a weird one, which is just like I'm interested in the yellow tech Soul.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's anywhere close to as good, but after seeing the yin transit diodes thing
I hear what you're saying.
and the integrated economy thing, like I could see Soul trying that and it being pretty effective. I think the argument here that we'll probably make a bunch when we talk about green versus yellow is in regards to ground forces. I think of if you want your ground forces to be more powerful, you go for green. If you want to have more ground forces, you go for yellow. And both are good, and you don't need both at the same time. It's an either or, and I generally think stronger ground forces is easier and faster, but there is certainly an argument for just like I'm just going to swarm you with ground forces.
I hear you. I think the reason I don't feel like transit diodes and integrated is necessary is just because of orbital drop.
Absolutely.
If they didn't have orbital drop,
well, and it's too slow.
I would
you
totally
start
be
with blue-green. You're already there.
Yeah, you might as well make your infantry better and give yourself more movement options than just be able to transit diodes around. Mostly because if you're doing orbital drop correctly, you should have that covered already.
Right.
And it's so much more at will. Transit diodes is an exhaust that you can only do once per round.
Right.
And actually, in the context
so
of
is integrated
Soul,
economy.
Right. And in the context of Soul, moving 4 infantry around actually doesn't even seem like a whole lot compared to like the stuff you can really pump out.
Exactly. Your carriers and your flagship are going to move
carriers can
way
move 8.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, is that right? Yeah, 8. Yeah.
8 when they're upgraded, 12 with it's ridiculous.
I like doubted for a minute because that just sounded so crazy to me.
Is it that many? Yeah, and I think this is the perfect example as well of what we were talking about more off the top, which is like this is sort of the part where TI4 tech is less interesting, right? It would be cool to see Soul go deep into yellow and pull off slick maneuvers with integrated economy and transit, but it is so much further away from you than the other stuff, it just doesn't make any sense to get it. This is why you don't see Soul go for yellow, is because it's just like, you're right next to blue-green. Why would you not do that?
Yeah, why it's so much easier, and because there is really no PDS Soul on the books.
Right.
Although, let's get even freakier.
Okay.
Throw some PDS down, get Graviton, get Plasma, get Magen. Maybe Magen is helpful?
Maybe?
I don't know.
I mean, we'll say this
That's
about
crazy.
Magen Defense Grid. Magen Defense Grid only becomes somewhat useful in large numbers, right? If it's a 2v2 ground combat, Magen doesn't do anything. Ignoring one round of combat in a 2v2 is pretty much useless. But if it's like a 7v7, one round of combat could be like what makes or breaks it. If you get 3 hits in that first round of combat, you've completely changed the dynamic of the fight. So this is like the one situation where Magen is maybe okay.
Right.
Now, it's
regardless,
it's an exhaust, it's bad. No, I'm not saying Magen is good.
No.
I'm saying this is the only way it is good. And so if you were trying to make a case to me of a PDS thing where you also went down red tech or whatever, okay, I'll buy it. You know, like Carrier 2 with Duranium armor, that's pretty interesting.
That is.
I don't know if
even
it's
think about
better, but like if we're gonna go down red, if we've decided to do that, I don't know. There's something there. It is less optimal than green blue, but you know, I'm interested to see it.
But I think it's unquestionably green blue,
right,
in the most obvious way.
Exactly.
For Soul.
For Soul.
Or blue green. I like to say better.
Yeah. I think we'll later on see other factions where like you can make a better case for like the weirder side cases, but Soul is the number one. This is why people don't like Soul, is because it's kind of boring, because it really is like all of you make all of the right choices easily, and like diverging from that main plan kind of like, why would you be like you have such an automatic win if you check all of these boxes, and
it's just
so
hard
to
pretty.
Ignore. Right.
It's so pretty, the way that it all synergizes and the way that it feels like you can't really mess up because you have so many good options. And you're not Joel Nar. Like, I mean, obviously, with everything, no matter how much we might fawn over a particular faction, you should know, like, Jolnar, yeah, it's the best when it comes to tech.
Right.
So, like, don't listen to me say this and think, like, what does he think that's... It's
Soul
just
was-
that Soul has other advantages as well on top of all of this,
Right.
and it's ridiculous.
Right. So let's talk about another one. We've been bringing up Asarl a bunch, which is maybe a weird thing to some people, because Asarl, the reason we're talking about Asarl is Asarl has 2 green faction technology.
Mm-hmm.
Magion implants and transparasteel plating both require green. So in terms of like getting 2 faction tech and getting 2 tech, or getting 4 tech of the same color, yes, those are both secret objectives, and we set off the top like we're not trying to plan for that, but no one does it better than Asarl. And we're talking about Asarl here. No one does secret objectives better. No one does secret planning stuff better than Asarl. So it's really like just adding to all of the things that they're doing super, super well.
What I think is really interesting about Asarl is they're probably the only faction I can make a strong argument for just rushing down one color.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yeah, just sprint to it. You kind of ignore the 2 tech and 2 colors, which is weird. And you're also, honestly, you're sort of ignoring upgrades, which is why it's like, what are we even talking about then? We're ignoring like one of the main stipulations we set up in the beginning here. But it's because what you're going to gain from like sprinting down green is a lot of power in the late game, and then you're going to, it's not going to be that hard to get 2 more tech and colors and get some upgrades, right? If you're going straight down green, okay, well, we're going to get infantry 2, because why not? And then what? We get a blue and fighter 2 or whatever. It's like we can kind of just get whatever we want. It is a little bit more out of the way, but what's not out of the way is getting lots of very, very valuable green tech. What I love about Asarl is we're skipping everything that is somewhat dead to us.
Yeah.
Daxiv is a good tech, but transparasteel plating replacing it is great.
Yeah, especially for just like the kind of general synergy of it.
Right.
So yeah, you start with neural, which obviously is the most neural of all the neural techs. Transparasteel plating, it's only useful in the late game, but if you get hyper after that and then Magion, now it feels like we have a Magion, sorry. It feels like we have a very strong like list of abilities.
Right.
And I think people get scared with going down this particular path because they think like, oh, well, I'm not going to have the movement that I need to groove around.
Yeah.
Well, your flagship is the only 2 movement flagship in the game, and I would encourage you to use it for that reason.
Yep.
And then the other deal is you're hopefully, if you have especially Magion early, you're most certainly going to have flank speeds.
Right.
That those are hopefully going to be available to you. And Magion also is a neural type tech, where the earlier you get it, the better it is for you and the more useful it is.
Right. And what's interesting to me about Asarl is we're ignoring some of the victory condition things, but like it is so simple to acquire all of this other stuff. That's why we make this consideration, right? Is it's just so quick and easy and clean.
So Soul is blue-green, and I would describe Asarl as green-blue. Like big green, little blue.
Right. You're going to get blue later to fulfill the objectives if they come up. That's sort of the difference here. Is Asarl gets to make the choice. Soul's just going to get all of those objectives automatically. Asarl is getting a lot of power and then only has to diverge a little bit to fulfill those last objectives. But you're going to do a lot more along the way.
If you feel like we're not making a strong case here, think about the synergy between having hyper early and getting extra command counters, being able to use your stall tactics with the action cards that you're getting, Neural giving you extra action cards, and then also being able to use Magion as a stall, but also to take more action cards from other players. And then also factor in transparasteel plating into that. The idea that you're going to be able to stall out your opponents in that last round, it's completely assured.
And honestly, if you're rushing
necessary
for it, it's not even that last round. Like, you're just going to dominate the second half of every single round, right? From like round 3 or 4 onward, it's Yssarl's game after, 3 or 4 turns. Like, everyone's just, okay, I pass, and Yssarl, go ahead and do 4 actions or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I do want to kind of point out this probably contradicts some stuff we talked about in the Isarl episode. I feel like we didn't play up how good. We even probably disagreed a little bit with, like, at the time, people were trying to tell us Magion and Transparasteel are really good, and we were like, well, I think they're both decent, but I think it's because it is that scenario you just described, Hunter. It's not that they are independently awesome. It's that if you sprint down green and you get all of it, you set yourself up to have this kind of pretty awesome superpower of stalling out and doing a lot. And that's where the power of Isarl's optimal tech path comes from.
And then all you have to do if you get in trouble with is just throw in a little bit of blue.
Right, which is going to help you anyways. Gravity,
Yeah.
Isarl loves Gravity Drive. We can't wait to get Gravity Drive. We can't even wait to get Fleet Logistics, honestly.
Right.
But, that's like the late game consideration sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have anything weird we want to throw out with Isarl as, like, just kind of a strange idea?
It's hard. It's hard with Isarl because it's like, it's so obviously you go for green, right?
Right,
I mean,
right. Can we make an argument for yellow?
Honestly, the first argument I would make is ignore green and sprint down blue, right?
Yeah.
Get Fleet Logistics, get Light Wave Deflector, have Gravity Drive. Like, all of those things lead to a very, very movement focus. This is the type of Isarl I could see. So the green tech Isarl is the, like, I'm gonna hold back a lot, and I'm gonna have all these action cards, and I'm gonna do a lot with them, and I'm gonna take all these crazy secret actions. The blue tech Isarl is more like I'm gonna build fleets, and I'm gonna put them everywhere you don't want me to go. I'm not gonna have quite as many action cards, but I'm still gonna have a lot because I'm Isarl, and I'm not gonna have, like, quite as much ability to stall, but I'm going to replace that with I'm going to have way more powerful fleets because they're going to get where you don't want them to go.
Yeah. The only thing that I feel like holds me back from making, like, a green yellow versus a green blue argument for Isarl is that so many of the action cards kind of depend on you having a fleet to make use of them. There's not enough that are like, all right, well, I like if you went like like infantry 2 and then like transit diodes kind of deal with Isarl, I feel like there's not enough action. There's like parlay,
right?
And then what else is there that kind of like stump? There's like fire team. No, that's for if you're invading.
Yeah, there's experimental battle stations. There's like a few defensive action cards, but for the most part, this is the problem. I would describe Isarl as an aggressive race. So that's why we don't go yellow. That's why we don't go yellow red, right? We're not building PDS. I don't think Isarl ever puts down a PDS unless they have to for like secret objectives. So like I'm looking at the red tech right now, and I cannot come up with a reason to ever get red tech as Isarl. I just don't see it. You're not really building dreadnoughts, so you don't need Duranium. Magion is useless. Plasma scoring, you're not really getting that many things with bombardment or space cannon. It's just like there's no logic to going red tech for Isarl. And so because of that, because the best red combo is yellow red for PDS2 and then also Cruiser 2.
Right.
Like, if we can't make that consideration, red very quickly drops down. I mean, this is the reason red tech is sort of like the worst change. You're going to very often see us not make a case for red tech. Almost no factions include red tech in their optimal tech path because red is not optimal, because Magion is bad, and because Destroyer 2 is not very good. Like, it's just not useful to go down that path, and so to play optimally, you always go down other paths.
Right. I think that's kind of it for Isarl.
I think so too.
I really like that we got both these two out of the way though, Sol and Isarl at the beginning, because I just feel like they're just the prettiest.
Right.
When you look at your tech, it just always looks so pretty.
Right.
What you have in front of you.
Again, it's the no dead tech situation. It's just like you always feel like everything you bought as Isarl and Sol is like, yep, that helps and that helps and it helps every single round. It's Hunter's Law, right? All of the not that each tech individually is Hunter's Law, but like the fact that you're not wasting any time and you're using all of it pretty much constantly, that is Hunter's Law. For those who it's been a long time since we really talked about Hunter's Law, but Hunter's Law is like the more you use it and the more automatic it is to use, the better it is, right? Is that a good way to define it?
It's sort of the neural thing that we're talking about, actually. It's just like the more you get to use something automatically, the more it contributes to your game, the more important it is as an advantage.
Right.
Yeah, I think in thinking about the Sarl first round strategy guide that was so long ago now,
Yep.
the thing I think that has changed mostly is that I've just seen a lot of Yssarl get Magion,
Magion. Yeah.
Magion implants and just go to town. And
Right.
also just getting hyper early with them is so fantastic.
Yep.
Having more command counters than everybody and also stall tactics on top of that. I mean,
Right.
you just get to a point where you stall people out almost more effectively, I feel like, than they did in TI3, which is
Right.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. So let's talk about another one. Let's talk about Yin, because we've been talking about them so much this episode. I feel like it's worth sort of like exploring them a little bit more.
Right.
In our guide for Yin, we sort of made the case for green yellow, mostly green, right? Like it was like, okay,
Right.
we're gonna make these infantry awesome, and we're sort of doing yellow just because right, I mean, because we start with Sarween. That's really what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
Yin
Yeah.
is the argument of our optimal tech path is chosen because of our starting tech.
Right.
And we don't want to like dip into red because it's out of the way. People will make the case for red tech because, oh well, they're destroyers. If you make your destroyers better, that's pretty useful, right? And like, I don't know, I guess Majin is useful for Yin. Not really. It's never useful. But there has been an argument for red tech, but I think we outlined the argument for green yellow, and I think it is significantly more efficient purely because of how good those first few green tech are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting Neural and then getting Daxiv and then getting Infantry 2 always feels good with any faction, and with Yin, it's like doubly so.
And if you have a yellow skip,
skipping the transit diodes is amazing. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It is amazing. And in fact, depending on who you're going up against, getting transit diodes before even bothering with the upgraded infantry might be worth it.
Yeah. And then another thing on top of that is I made the case for upgrading your space dock because I want you to sprint for Mechatol, and an upgraded space dock on Mechatol is like super helpful. So green yellow gets you upgraded infantry, upgraded space docks, really good transit diodes, ground forces that are also upgraded and fighting, super well. Like there's just a lot of synergy there that works with Yin's innate abilities, right? Just the fact that they're already dominating the ground combat game, and you're like making those ground forces have access to more spaces and fight better. Like obviously that's helping.
We are now, this is probably the first faction that we've talked about though where we can talk about there is a little bit of lack of symmetry,
right?
Because
their
Impulse
faction
Core,
tech,
Impulse Core is a great. Well, it's not a great tech, but I hate it.
Better
than it's better than Graviton. And
but
it would be a good skip for Graviton, but it is not that. It is a transit diodes skip, and that's
not helpful.
No.
And the same problem with Yin Spinner, honestly. Yin Spinner is not that great of a tech, and it is a replacement for hypermetabolism, which
I would rather have hyper.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So our problem with Yin is, we're getting some decent synergy, but if we want to get two faction technology for the secret objective, well, we're getting some stupid stuff.
Right, but we do at least qualify going green.
Right,
yellow,
we're going
obviously.
in that direction, and it helps a lot to be going in that direction.
Right. What do you feel like getting Graviton is a dead enough tech for Yin that they shouldn't even bother, basically, or that if that's in your way, would you not go for transit right away if you had to get Graviton?
My argument is if you don't have the yellow skip, you do all the green stuff first, and then you get Graviton if you need to fulfill 2 in 2. But if by the time you do all that other stuff, like by the time you get to Infantry 2, you will know if 2 and 2 colors is even going to be a thing, and then you decide whether or not you get Graviton. And if it never came out, then all right, we're just going to get other stuff, right? Now is when we start getting, I don't know, anti-mass or like whatever helps us do other things. Or maybe we just stop buying tech and we start getting way more fleets or whatever. Like that, it's you have enough time to decide whether or not you're getting 2 and 2 color.
And I want to make it clear, if we say if we're talking about a faction and we're saying that they should go for Infantry 2 early, it's because we're assuming that they're going to go for Mechatol.
Yeah.
You don't rush Infantry 2 just just willy-nilly. Just you know what
Except
I mean?
for maybe in Soul's. I mean, Soul I think should go for Mechatol, but like Soul can kind of do whatever they want with their infantry.
Soul can go infantry too, regardless, just because it's such a good upgrade for really. I mean, yeah, definitely for them. I mean,
Right.
infantry hitting on 6 is completely insane. But regardless, the point we mean is that like when we say upgrade to infantry 2, it's not like with Dreadnought 2 and Fighter 2 and like all of the fleet stuff,
Yeah.
you do all kinds of stuff with that.
Right.
Infantry 2 is more like locking down your slice, but also taking something that's going to get you a lot of points.
Right.
And that's almost always Mechatol.
Right.
But it could also mean, various control objectives too. There's different ways you can work it. I want you to know that it's a kind of a more specific type of thing.
Right. So what's the weird stuff we do with Yin?
I think you could throw a plasma scoring in there and get
Right.
Cruiser 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Cruiser 2 is great. I'm super into that. It also gives you access to PDS 2. So if you really want to, you can like, it lets you be a little bit more crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Cruiser 2s, you're just like throwing. I tried this one game. It never worked really for me. This is why I ended up leaning into the infantry thing. But there is an argument for like, if you can sneak those Cruiser 2 ground forces into some weird places, and then the key is building up a PDS network. Like you're already kind of in the red-yellow area, right? So if we're doing that, we're putting PDS on our home slice so that we can defend that while we do crazy stuff with our cruisers.
Yeah.
I think that is a fun play. I think it works less often than just the straight up infantry 2 play, but I think there is room for that to work.
Yeah.
And it technically like pushes you in the direction of, if you really do want to get Destroyer 2, if you have a Nalu or Clan Asar problem, like, yeah, why not upgrade those destroyers? This is like the one game you might decide to do that.
I honestly feel like, though, my favorite opening from now on when I play Yin would be to get a yellow skip and go for transit diodes first. I mean, it was just so cool.
Right.
It was so cool.
Because I think with Yin, you definitely can upgrade the ground forces later.
Yeah.
I want to upgrade the ground forces, but if I can get transit diodes, I can like make do for a while because I'm just going to put them in all the best places.
The only reason I would maybe say that you have to go infantry 2 first is if you're making a Mechatol play and Soul is in the game.
Right.
Because you're not going to beat them there. And like that's the thing about any faction that starts with a single blue tech has an opportunity to just get somewhere faster than everybody else. That's just always going to be true.
Yep.
So Soul is going to get there faster.
Yep.
It's just period.
Yep. They're already on the way.
Right. And then so it just becomes a like you got to grab Warfare or you got to do something else. So
yeah. All right. Let's talk about one more faction, and then let's kind of like peek behind the curtain of we want to talk about this again next week because we really want to break down like every single faction. We just don't have time to do all of them because from here on out, in one episode, because from here on out, the discussions get much more complicated, right?
Right.
Soul and Asarl, these are all pretty easy to just like, yeah, this is good and you should do it. We're going to use Mentak as sort of a teaser to like how things get more complicated and a little bit more of the strategy of like, now you need to like really be thinking about optimal tech paths because it's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
So we want to talk about Mentak because we've already been talking about Mentak, but also Mentak is a good example of the problem you're going to kind of run into because Mentak wants to do a couple things at once. We want Cruiser 2 and we want mirror computing, right? Those are the big things. Those two things together are what are going to make us a pretty awesome superpower.
Yeah.
But that means we need 1 green plus Cruiser 2, then we need 3 more yellow. And technically, we also would like to get PDS 2 if we can manage it. So that's a lot of tech. And it doesn't all necessarily synergize with each other. It kind of does in that same way we just described with like the Yin getting to do crazy stuff. This is my favorite play with Mentak is your cruisers are just out all over the place, and then your home slice is purely defended by PDS. So there is some synergy, but it always feels like with Mentak you have to decide which you want to go for first. This is why I like having a green tech skip as an opener, because then you just get Cruiser 2 out of the way and you're done. Because that's where I think this slows down the most, is like, we want mirror computing and we want it very, very badly, right? I mean, there's just no argument to not getting mirror computing. It is probably, it is in the top 5 tech in the entire game.
For sure.
And so
they're kind of like an uglier version of the Isarl tech
Right.
path,
Right.
where their racial tech is all in one color, and they're very encouraged to go down that
Yeah.
path, but it feels a little bit more wobbly,
Right.
because it's not a meta advantage.
Yeah,
It is
and-
just kind of a like, here's some money.
Right. And the big difference here is you don't have a skip for Graviton. So, like,
Yeah.
one of the reasons we decide to go with PDS for Mentak is because we kind of just have to get Graviton on the way. And so we might as well increase the ability of our PDS. Because the other option is to get Graviton, not build PDS, and we have a dead tech. Right. So we're the only reason we're getting PDS is we start with yellow red, so we can also just get PDS 2 whenever we want. And we're probably getting Graviton. So it just makes sense to play a little bit of a PDS focused game as a Mentak. This is one of those weird situations of the tech path changes how we think of this faction. In TI3, I would have never thought of Mentak as a PDS focused faction. It's just like, what do you that doesn't make any sense. But in TI4, because of their starting tech and because of their faction tech leading you through other PDS focused tech, you just like you make better PDS, and that's sort of this weird caveat that we add to them. The other problem, of course, is we like Neural, but we really, really like Cruiser too. And I don't know. It just comes down to like everything we get with Mentak is pretty good. It's just a matter of deciding what we get first, right?
Yeah.
And it usually feels better to rush for mirror computing, but I think there are arguments to not do that. There are plenty of games where round 1 we get Neural, round 2 we get Cruiser 2, round 3 we get PDS 2. Like, okay, now we're finally going for mirror computing. That doesn't feel great, but like it does make sense in terms of making them work well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I want to make an argument, though, that I think I see a lot of Mentak players going for Mirror too early.
Yeah.
Because Mirror is really game winning in phase 2 when you've got the like 16 resources objective.
It doesn't
or, like, things
actually
like
help
that.
you that. I mean, it does help you because it makes your fleets cheaper. Like you can buy a cruiser for 1 trade good. That is
Sure, but
useful.
Mentak already do cheap fleets.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
You already
Like,
do cheap
they're
fleets,
already-
and you're banking a bunch of trade goods anyway. So I agree
Yeah.
with that. Like mirror computing is really almost similar to quantum data hub node. It is not at all the same like ride or die. This only works in the last round of the game. But mirror computing is mostly useful as just a like this is going to help me win the game.
Yeah. I'm going to throw some spaghetti at the wall right now.
Okay.
I think the main reason that Mentak wants Cruiser 2 is obviously it's not necessarily about 3 movement. I mean, that's useful,
cool,
but it's about the capacity, right? It's about having that being able to take a planet with a dude, right?
Right. It is that, and the other consideration is the pre-fire.
Yeah.
I mean, we're only increasing it by 1, but like having 2 pre-fire shots on a 6, that is pretty good.
No, it's super good. It's super good.
And compiling that with the PDF, if we get our deep space cannon, like compiling that with, there are plenty of shots. In the game I had the other day, I had PDS sort of on my perimeter, which meant every time I was stretching out a little bit, it's like a slow wave. I was firing 2 shots on a 6 and then like 3 shots on a 5 before combat. That's
Right.
like where the power of Mentak really comes from.
I'm just wondering if there's a place for transit diodes in the Mentak, like, kind of overall strategy.
You're saying
Because
in this
imagine-
Cruiser 2 world, in this like...
No, I'm saying instead of Cruiser 2 early,
okay.
a transit diodes play. This is spaghetti, by the way.
Sure.
I'm just throwing this at the wall. So let's say we've got, because the thing that I don't like about the Mentak opening that we've always talked about is it seems to be very dependent on a green skip.
Right.
Super
Or a yellow
dependent.
skip, to be honest. Like
Well, see,
skipping...
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you get a yellow skip, if you could skip to transit diodes and then ferry your ground forces around via a carrier and just not really build any more ground forces, but kind of just like use that one carrier to like move forward.
Yeah.
I wonder if there is anything to that, because if you're going PDS and you don't have more ground forces than everybody else, but they're just all concentrated.
Right.
And so that's kind of how you fill out your slice into the PDS kind of cover. I wonder. I don't know. I just wonder if there's anything to that.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Here's my argument against it. And again, it just comes down to the optimal nature of what we're talking about today. Salvage operations is technically the replacement for transit diodes.
Yeah, and you don't want to skip that.
And it falls in line with the kind of young and spry Mentak that we're describing. This Mentak that gets all over the place with Cruiser 2s uses salvage operations more often. You kill stuff, you rebuild a ship that you destroyed, you're gaining trade goods. That falls in line with getting mirror computing. Like, this scrappy, move all over the place Mentak seems to have more, I guess symmetry is the word you keep using. I think of it as synergy. Like, it feels more in line with Mentak is doing than this sort of like, let me pop my ground forces around. I think that's the slower play. I think there's room for it, but it is a little bit. It takes a little bit more planning, I guess. Whereas the other Mentak gets to kind of just like, let me just jump on whoever has a weak fleet at whatever moment I can, because I'm going to get a lot out of it.
I just think the weak point in Mentak to me seems to be holding planets early, because until you get the PDS down, they're always kind of open, because Cruiser 2 can only bring one. So that means like most planets that you're taking, you're bringing like a guy, maybe two guys. Here's where
I think your plan works a little bit better. Is the reason I want to get all over the place as Mentak is I want to be neighbors with everybody, right? I want to. The other thing I'm trying to do is get across the board, because I just need to be able to steal from everyone. If you are in a game where trade has just completely locked down and like, okay, it's like everyone only has two commodities and everyone's like, you know what, screw Mentak, we're just not this game. We're not trading because we don't want to deal with it. And that has happened. That's when I think your plan works a little bit better, because now there's less incentive for Mentak to be scrappy, because they're just not going to gain as much out of it.
Right.
So it makes sense to kind of do this slow crawl. All right, if you're not going to let me steal from you, I'm going to steal your planets. I'm going to build up these bigger forces that let me just take stuff from you.
You know, I think really the reason I even brought that up in general, because like once I started talking it out, I was like, I don't know if I'm making this point correctly. I think really the only thing I want to throw out there is I don't know how much I like salvage operations over transit, because I oftentimes see Mentak cruisers kind of sneak off to like a planet and drop a dude there. And if they had transit, I always think about like, well, if you hadn't gone for salvage, now you could have like reinforced that one random planet in that hard to reach place with your cruiser too.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's a valid like way of looking at it that I almost never see. I always see people get salvage, and salvage is not bad. I'm not trying to say it sucks. I'm just saying transit's also very good, and it's hard for me to do the calculation for which one is better. I mean, you want to trade good, like
I think this is sort of what I was trying to define in the beginning that was hard to do, and it's that the problem with Mentak is hard to define, like why it feels messy. Because Mentak is one of these first factions we have where it's like, it actually feels like maybe we have other options on the table. I just don't quite know how to really get there. You know, when we talked about Sol and Yasaro, we said, like, you do that. Like, the other options are far inferior. With Mentak, it doesn't feel like the other options are that inferior. And so you start to wonder if what you're doing is the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is what we're going to talk a lot more about next week, is because from here on out, every other faction does not necessarily have like a perfect path, right?
Right.
So I think what Hunter and I want to do now is sidebar the rest of these factions. We still need to talk about Sar, Nalu, Lizix, Barony, Aletnev, Ghosts, Embers, Extra, Arborek, Winu, Sardak. There's a lot, right? That's so many factions we still need to talk about, and there's just too much to say about all of them from here on out. So, are we going to do this next week? I think so.
I think so. I would like to hear from. I mean, if you guys hated this episode, maybe we'll think about it.
I think everyone's going to have a lot of input, and I think because the factions we're about to get into are a lot messier, I think we can pre-errata this one a little bit. So I want to put the call out to people saying, tell us about A, your favorite optimal tech paths with all the factions we haven't talked about yet, and B, tell us about the weird tech paths that are maybe not optimal, but are things that we should think about how to how do we do that with this faction?
Yeah.
And
And
I
if
think,
we missed anything today that
Sure.
you feel like we needed to talk about, I mean, obviously that's the whole pitch of the show.
Yep.
Let us know.
let us know. So let's call it there, and let's talk about all these other factions a lot more next week.
For sure.
Cool. So we don't have errata. We're not going to jump over to the right. Well, no, we did have errata. We already did it, right? Off the top.
Yeah, we did it at the top.
So-
but it's rundown time,
Yeah.
I think.
Let's. I'll do the rundown real quick. How
Yeah,
about
all right.
you go to Space Cats Pod on Twitter for some game updates, announcements, things like that. Facebook for more announcements. You can also message us questions on Facebook, rules questions, show questions, whatever. On Reddit /r/Twilight Imperium, you find discussions for each post, just like what we're describing now. Please come and discuss with us on Reddit so we can talk about what we want to explore next week. We also have a BGG guild where we do a little bit more discussion and an outdated calendar that I keep saying is outdated and then don't fix. Hooray! You can email us at spacecatspieceturtles@gmail.com. This is where we get This Imperium Life and Play of the Week submissions. We want you to send us some of your favorite plays, things that happened, things like the transit diodes yin that we described, all sorts of stuff. We want to hear about the cool plays that you did, and we want to share them with others. We also have a Patreon. Our Patreon is getting retooled here soon, but the Patreon helps us improve the show. We can get better equipment with it. We can go to conventions and do tournaments, and it helps us just kind of improve the width of people we can, hit with our podcast. Also,
right. And we're trying to hit people with
we're
it,
trying to
you know what
hit
I mean?
you over
We're
the
trying
head
to
with our podcast.
We're trying to smack you upside the head with all this turtle cat stuff.
Join our Discord. It is all we have a link to that in the Reddit posts. We do lots of just fun conversations. There's always people talking in our Discord. There's Europeans and Americans alike. So there's people all around the world talking at all hours of the day. There's always time for conversation on our Discord, and that's also where you get some of our Patreon benefits, like discussing things in the Galactic Council and talking to our people who are in the Good Yin Brotherhood. Please rate our podcast on iTunes and any other podcast app you have. It increases the visibility of our show and of Twilight Imperium. Hunter Donaldson.
Hey, what up? I'm a comedian, stand-up comedian based out of Portland, Oregon. I got a couple shows I want to throw at you. But I've been doing these backyard comedy shows called Comedy Party, House Show Comedy. Ever heard of them? We were in the paper, the Oregonian, which was
We were
cool.
in the newspaper.
We were in the newspaper that we're getting on that dope new media train. And it's the end of the season for that show. Summer's almost over, so backyard shows are basically going to be done. So for our final show, it will be on August 25th. Again, the show is called Comedy Party House Show Comedy. I came up with it, and I'm so proud. We are actually moving locations. It's not going to be at the same house. It's still a house show, so it's still going to be weird. But we're not going to do the same place. We found a bigger yard that can fit more people in it because we were kind of getting to capacity.
Yeah.
Because it's a very popular show, and I will say we have a very special secret headliner that I cannot advertise for contract reasons. I could get that person in trouble. So yeah, please come to see the mystery person. I guarantee you, if you have not heard of them, they will become probably one of your favorite comedians of all time. The new location is 6426 Northeast Hassalo. It's
Spell that.
Hassalo. And yeah, bigger yard, different place. It's still gonna have, it's still gonna be the same level of production that you have seen if you've been to any of the past shows, which I know there have been a handful of Space Cats that have shown up for them. And that show starts at 8:30 p.m. Again, it's on August 25th. Very excited to be closing out the season for that show. It's my favorite show that I do. I got a couple other shows I'm going to throw at you real quick. On September 4th, me and my sketch group, the Love Boys, are going to be doing another show at Kelly's Olympian. That starts at 8:30. And then Yolks and Jokes, which is a brunch comedy show that I do with my comedy partner, Jake Silberman. That will be on September 8th at the Lamp. That starts at 11:30 a.m. Because it is a brunch show.
Hooray.
So yeah. That's me.
I want to thank some patrons. I want to thank our space kitties, the cartographer of chaos in Mac we trust. I want to thank the commander. I want to thank Jimbov, which in the past we've always said Jimbo V, but we met him at Gen Con and learned the truth. It's Jimbov. And we want to thank Jadapake. I also want to thank some other contributors, Rear Admiral Chinaru. I do that wrong every time.
I think we've been corrected, and I don't even remember
Doesn't
what
matter.
it was.
Mahat Maniac, Jesper Person, and Mr. Thom, also known as the Arch Thom of Meme Town. Hunter,
Play of the week time, yeah.
give me that play of the week.
So this play of the week is from Alex, not the Alex that we...
Not frequent
that we talk about a
contributor
lot.
Alex, no.
Not frequent contributor Alex, another Alex. Here we go. We're in round 6, and it's obvious that the Clanisar and Extra are in a position to win. Both are on 8 points. Clanisar holds Mechatol and still has a single point objective they can score, plus a secret objective. Extra is similar. I, as Hakan, need 3 points this round, scoring ahead of both of them, or the game is lost. I don't have any secret objectives. My fleet is just 4 cruisers and a carrier spread out across the board. Wow, that's tough. Even though I can spend 10 trade goods this turn on a 2-point objective, the table is not worried about me. I'm second in strategy picks, and I take Imperial to block Tsar from the Mechatol point. Everybody else is happy with this. A very generous move. Oh, how nice.
How benevolent of you.
Yeah. So the first turn, Clanisar and Extra are both maneuvering to score objectives. Extra has been talking about blockading me, so I activate my home system and pump out a fleet. It's a defensive move. No threat from Hakan. The second turn, Clanisar gets in position to score a single point objective. Extra continues his maneuvers, and I'm worried he has plans for Mechatol. My gambit can't wait any longer. It's time to stop playing the Pussycat and don the Lion's Mane. I'm going to say that now the next time I play Hakan. I exhaust transit diodes and move 4 of my spread out, unthreatening infantry to the system my carrier is in. My harmless, disparate Cruiser 2s all find paths to Mechatol Rex. The open hand of trade is now the bald fist of war. I use gravity drive on my carrier and bring the 4 infantry along as well. Clanisar retreats. He still thinks he can win and wants to preserve his strength. My forces take the planet with a single loss. Nobody has a fleet close enough or big enough to take my home system, but everybody begins plotting together to take Mechatol from me. They get 1 turn each to stop me, or I activate Imperial and win. I love moments like this. It's always the best. Clanisar goes first. He doesn't have a fleet to attack me, but activates Mechatol so that Extra can use space cannons against my fleet here. I lose a cruiser. Now, that's actually against the rules. So.
Yeah, we should note that. Unfortunately,
that's actually not how
you
that
can
works,
only
though.
fire space cannon at the person who activated the system unless, like, you are the defender in that situation. But it's fine. We'll ignore that for now. But it still is worth noting that Clanisar did try to do something.
Yeah,
it makes the story better. So we wanted to leave it in there.
It does help make the story better because he does lose a cruiser. So here we go. Mentak goes second. He moves in a fleet and destroys more ships. Just 1 cruiser left now. Barony goes third. He brings a huge fleet and easily wipes out my cruiser. He bombards with dreadnoughts and I lose 2 infantry. 1 left. He commits his ground forces. I parlay. Only Extra is left, and he only has a carrier in reach of Mechatol. He loads it up with 2 fighters and 2 infantry. The Barony retreats from Mechatol, but Extra still needs to avoid his parting shots. Barony's dreadnoughts roll 2 hits and take out the 2 fighters. It's just the carrier left. Barony rolls for his cruisers. 1 hit. Extra's carrier, and with its infantry, are destroyed. I activate Imperial, score 3 points, and win the game. Crazy. I love that dog pile stuff. It's always so funny and so great.
Yeah, it is. It's so funny how the dog pile can either be the worst part of TI or the best part of TI, right?
Right.
Because sometimes the dog pile is like 2 full rounds, and it's just like, oh my god. Like, actually, here's what it is. When the dog pile works, it is just like extending the game forever. But when everyone dog piles and you make it out alive, then it's like, okay, this was a really, really cool game because I survived the dog pile. But when you don't survive the dog pile, it definitely feels like it's just like, oh, great. So I just got to get crushed and nobody cares. And then somebody else gets to win. Boo-hoo.
I just always think that it's funny, like in fiction, thinking about what's happening when somebody's trying to retreat and they accidentally
kill.
Like it's
things.
like it's like there's like an order from the top, like, okay, don't destroy Extra's fleet, and the Barony dreadnoughts were like, okay, right, we're supposed to, yeah, right, we'll do it. And then they're just like, fire.
Yeah.
Like, they don't care. Like, they're just like, no, what we do is
just hot on the trigger.
Yeah, it's just funny that you actually can't like it would be interesting if there was a way to not actually fight someone, like actually just retreat and run.
Right.
Or
Interesting.
like, just get out of their way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love it.
Cool game.
Great.
I'm
great
really
game.
coming around on this Twilight Imperium game.
Yeah,
I think
not
it's
bad.
good.
Not bad. Not a bad showing.
I think it's about time we do a review.
Oh, boy.
You know?
Let's review of Twilight
should do a
Imperium.
review.
All
yeah,
right.
we should rate it out of 10. We should rate this game that we've spent
A year
God
talking
knows
about.
how many hours playing.
Yep.
We should rate it out of 10.
All right. Well, coming someday in the future, Space Cats Peace Turtles official review of Twilight
Official review.
Imperium.
And who knows, maybe we'll
Maybe
turn
we
on
don't
it.
like it. Ooh. Yeah, I'm thinking 8 out of 10, weirdly enough.
Yeah, it's okay. It's pretty good.
All right.
It's
well,
fine.
we're going to get out of here, and next week, let's get even more discussion about some tech, and we want your input. Give us all your input on optimal tech, and let's have a just such an in-depth discussion next week. What do you say?
I'm thinking 7.5. Like, it's not going to be
yeah?
best. We're not going to give it the coveted best new board game like thing.
Yeah,
But
it's just
we're
not
gonna
new
give
anymore.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if we just one episode reviewed Twilight Imperium, gave it a middling review, and then the next episode we just talked about a different game,
Right.
Like we were like, well, now that we're done with our Twilight Imperium coverage,
Right.
now we're gonna talk about Strategio.
And the SCPT de Yares goes to... Thank you for listening to Space Cats Peace Turtles, and thanks to Ben Prunty for the use of his music. You can find more at benpruntymusic.com and benprunty.bandcamp.com. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.